back somewhere.
Me, sorry.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so go. Right. Good morning, members. Good morning, officers, and good morning to the members of the public who are watching. So if you could start the meeting, start with apologies for absence, please.
We have apologies from Councillor Chain and Councillor Sweet.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next is the minutes to approve as a correct record the minutes of the committee held on the 4th of November 2021. You're all happy with the minutes? So I propose that we accept them. Do I have a seconder? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Right. The next item, item 3. What we will do is consider item 3, and then we'll move item 8 up to the agenda to follow item 3. So there's continuity when it comes to the matter of informal meetings. So we need to consider the informal meeting notes. That was the meeting that was held on the 16th of December. As you will recall, because it was held in the format it was held, it was not, use the word, constitutional. So what we need to do to give effect to the decisions arising out of that meeting is to, as a committee, we need to ratify the decisions that were taken there. And there's a form of wording that will shortly be on the screen. There we are. No, that's I8. It needs item 3.
We don't have one, I'm afraid.
Okay, sorry. Right, I'll read it out. And this is the form of wording that I have been advised that we need to pass. I'll read it out slowly. As the meeting of the 16th of December 2021 was an informal meeting, the committee needs to ratify the 3 proposals that were agreed at that meeting. The what?
Sorry, just read that out.
No, that's 8. I'll carry on reading, right? So these were 1, to ratify the decisions taken at the informal joint ONS and DM committee budget meeting on the 13th of January. 2, to agree the inclusion of Mid Devon's request on today's agenda, which is at item 13B, and to set up a task and finish group as requested by the leader. So that is the proposal that's before the meeting. If we could take a vote to ratify these proposals. So I'd like to propose from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that, Chair.
Does anyone wish to speak? Or no? Okay, so can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much indeed. So if we could move to item 8, which also deals with an informal meeting. You will receive the notes of the joint informal meeting of the Development Management and Overview and Scrutiny Committee held via Teams on the 13th of January. And what we are required to do is, as agreed at the informal meeting held on the 16th of December, we need to ratify that decision. So the position is this, so that we need to ratify the recommendation that is on the screen, and I think that's only part of it. Yes. So if you look, basically what we're doing is seeking to ratify the decision that came out of the joint meeting.
So just to confirm, this is a recommendation to executive
Yes.
to recommend to council.
Yes, 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 just so it is clear.
Yeah.
This is a recommendation from the joint meeting to go to the executive, which they will consider next Thursday. And then the executive put forward a recommendation to full council. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, at the joint meeting, there will be an opportunity for members to discuss further any issues arising out of this. So this is just merely to ratify. It's more a procedural matter. So I'd like to propose that I'll just repeat this. I recommend that the joint ONS and DMC meeting be ratified. I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second.
All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So if we could go back to item 4, urgent business. There is no urgent business. Item 5, division of the agenda. It will not be necessary to divide the agenda. Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Any members wish to declare any interest? No? Okay, thank you. Public forum. No questions. Item 8 we've dealt with. Item 9, performance management report. So I think Councillor Hopwood is on the screen there. I can see her on the screen. And is Mr. Davis here? Oh, Mr. Davis has just appeared. Shall we wait for Mr. Davis to sit down? Right. Councillor Hopwood, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report covers the 2 quarters from July to December. It is still a challenging work environment. Quarter 2 included significant additional work finalising the COVID scheme. There is still a significant amount of work, additional process and systems implementation work happening alongside the COVID pressures. So maintenance performance level recorded for the past 2 years is a true testament to the staff commitment, flexibility throughout the pandemic, and just shows how resilient this council is in a crisis such as that of the last 2 years. More usual work demands are to 3. Just as the Southwest started seeing COVID sickness levels more in line with the rest of the country, higher short-term sickness levels are expected to continue into quarter 4. A challenging work environment will continue in quarter 4 with 2 new grant schemes being released. This will affect different parts of the population, but impacts will mostly be felt in the customer service team and revenues. Time of year when work demand grows. Homeless preventions have been pressures last year, with a corresponding increase shown in temporary accommodation use, historic averages. This shows the challenging nature of the housing crisis and lack of options for people facing homelessness. Both planning and continue their positive downward trajectory. Additional planning resource has been put in place over the year and should be having a positive effect on the level of workload and applications completed in target in the coming quarters. Performance reporting will be moving to reporting based on the thematic delivery plans and actions. Screenshots of performance data will still be shared with overviewing scrutiny for context. Thank you, Chairman.
Get this right. What I suggest we do is, if first of all we ask, can I invite questions on the report, and then I would propose that we go through the appendices starting at page 21. So if we could first of all start with any questions on the report itself before moving on to the Appendix A. Any member wish to?
Thank you, Chairman. On 4.1, reference to the member portal, am I right in thinking then now that this will be delayed to the end of, so would Q1 be, can you just let me know, Mr Davis or Councillor Hopwood, when we're looking at now realistically in terms of that being online?
Yeah, I'll take that. The yes, we're looking at end of Q1, so that's end of June. That time frame. So basically, same situation as last time we reported to overview and scrutiny, that we want to go live with a package of measures so that it's useful for the customers, and it's about tying that work in with the capacity in IT and also the capacity in the team with all the additional COVID grants that just dropped on our lap.
Any other questions? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions and one comment, if that's okay. Under 2.3, it talks about the level of short-term sickness that's COVID related, and whether this is a bigger question beyond the report, I'm not sure. But if the level of short-term sickness is that high, does it make a statement about the fact that working from home isn't necessarily a good idea? Or perhaps it is, I don't know, maybe it might have been higher had it been here. But so my question there was, is the decision to work from home likely to be forthcoming? And on 4.1, sorry, where Councillor Thomas has already made the comment about the pushing back of the deadline, I feel that that's quite a sad statement, in the sense that members are being, in my view, very much the poor relation in this technology rollout. And I think it's really important that members get access to information which is currently only available to them by going through, telephones or emails or whatever. And the last one is on 3.3. Sorry for jumping around a bit. On 3.3, we talk about calls being answered within 5 minutes has improved. I'm not sure that answering a call within outside 5 minutes is actually anything to be proud of. And I wonder what the standards are, particularly when we, if you like, in the good old days, answered calls within 3 rings or 5 rings or something like that. And I know something in the appendices at the end, but could someone give some sort of clarity about standards on call answering? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to answer those questions, Chairman, if I may. So the first question, with regards to absence and the level of working from home, we have done agile working for a few years now, and I think we need to decide on the level of agile working moving forward. Maybe officers working from home more than coming into the office. That's being reviewed at the moment. The other question about the members' portal being delayed, it's better to delay it than not get it right. So I think, yes, there has been a delay on it, and that's a shame, but I would rather it be delayed and be rolled out with no flaws in it than rushed through. So I don't think we're the poor relation at all, but I think we are working through the implementation at Northgate, and members, we haven't, it's, hopefully by the end of the year it'll be rolled out to members as well. And your last question was calls answered within 5 minutes, 3.3. If calls were answered within 3 rings, we'd be way overstaffed as an organisation. I don't think that anybody should have an aspiration to answer all calls within 3 rings, because that would mean we had too many staff. And calls answered within 5 minutes. There are very few organisations that have staffing levels to answer calls within 5 minutes, and that will come out within the review of the contact centre, which is being undertaken at the moment. And we did commit, I think it was at the last ONS meeting, to come back with a report and an update on that, and that will calls answered and times to wait will be in that report. So I would just ask you to bear with us till that report has been looked into, and that will be answered in that report. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Spence, you want to follow up on that, or is that? Councillor Mackay.
Right, okay. Anyway, do I need to turn this off now? I've got stereo. Anyway, okay. I've forgotten the question now. Are there any stats on the number of people? Because I've had lots of people complaining to me about how they've been on kept waiting for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then they've given up. Now, all of these stats are about calls answered and waiting times. Are there any stats on the, calls that don't get answered? Because obviously, if people are giving up because they've been waiting too long, there's a whole raft of information there that would be useful to know.
Yeah, Chairman.
That's my question. That's my question.
Chairman, I've just quickly looked at some stats, just out of interest. The calls answered, I've just found a stat for Councillor Hotwood, that's me, Councillor Spencer. In December, 73% of calls were answered within 5 minutes, just so we're not, I don't feel that bad. I've got an average time to answer calls here on most parts of the council, but I haven't got, oh yes I have, here we go. So in December we had no calls abandoned, and in November we had within, sorry, this isn't, I'm reading this as I'm going through, so I don't know if anybody else has got the information in their head, because I'm having to read it as I'm looking at it.
Yes, certainly. So in December we answered 87% of calls, so 13% are abandoned. We always expect some abandonment because we want people to move onto the website. So there's always messages to go out. So always some is expected. In the same month we had almost 40% of calls that were answered in 20 seconds. Which is basically your 3-ring measure, and that measure is a Goldilocks measure. You don't want it too low, you also don't want it too high, because you want to have the staffing levels at the right level. You don't want too many staff or too few. So we do have some data on extremely long waits, but as a percentage of the phone calls, it's very, very low. So 4 in 10 are answered virtually straight away, and we only get 13% of abandonments in December.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And this is personal because I tried contacting the council tax department in December and I was faced with a queue of 26. So I abandoned my call. You know, I can only speak as I find, and I did that a couple of times. And yeah.
There seems to be, I think a lot of members, the ones I talk to, have similar situations. We receive complaints from members of the public that they find it very difficult to get through and abandon calls. And I think to a certain extent that's reflected in the figures that you gave us a moment ago. Councillor Hotwood mentioned that we're going to be receiving a report as to how this situation is being dealt with. Is that correct? In other words, are we going to receive a report? And if we are going to receive a report, will it set out how the council is going to set about improving that performance? Because clearly it is giving rise to complaints to many of us, and it's not satisfactory in my view. But I mean, my question is there a report going to be coming to ONS in the near future dealing with this issue, and what steps are going to be taken to improve?
Chairman, I committed at the last ONS report to bring a report to ONS in 6 months to give an update on the how we're going through looking at the contact centre and how it operates. I know, unfortunately, the officer who is doing this review of the contact centre has been poorly, so that report may well be delayed through no fault of anybody's, bar COVID. So yeah, you will get a full report, and I would just ask you to like I did at the last ONS, to bear with us whilst this review of the contact centre has taken place. There hasn't been a review of the contact centre for many years, and now is a good time to review it, and that is what's happening at the moment.
So can we ask that this report reaches ONS, say, by the end of May, please?
No, Chairman, at the last meeting, I think it was the last meeting, you asked to look back on the minute, or maybe Mr. White says, I have a feeling it was the report was coming to ONS in 6 months. And that'll be the time.
If I may, Chair, we understand that the report is due March, April time.
It's on the record that it's coming to the next meeting in March or the meeting in April. So can we stick with that, please?
Hopefully, Chairman, I will say that the member of staff who was doing the review has been off for quite a while with sickness, so we're hoping to be on track, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be, but I wouldn't promise it because I wouldn't like to rush the report in to you. I'd rather delay it a month or so to get it right. It all depends on how far he has got with it.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, I have to say I do support Councillor Hotwood on this one. I did think at the last meeting we did talk about the fact that due to current circumstances it will be difficult to see a true picture unless we delayed a 6-month period. I would also say that it is likely that councillors are going to hear complaints because Mr. Davis has highlighted that there's a 13% drop off. Now, if 8% of that is irritation through waiting, those are the 8% we're going to hear about. We're not going to hear from people who are going to phone us up and say it's brilliant how quickly our calls are answered. I find myself defending the staff, as I always do, having worked in customer service, that, you know, I think actually I will be making an amendment, a potential amendment to the recommendation that we acknowledge the difficulty that staff have undergone through this period, and actually that if progress is being made at any level at this time, we should be applauding the hard work of the staff in that regard. Moving to the substantive report, could I please ask a question about 3.4 on the missed collections? Just on a point of clarity, if a round fails in part, can I be assured that the failures are being recorded by individual property rather than as a one-off fail on an area? So from a statistical point of view, we see X number of dwellings failed rather than one round having failed. Because I think from a reporting point of view, that's quite important. It looks like Mr. Molyneux wants to answer that.
Yes, Chair, I can answer that. Yes, they are recorded individually. So we are recording. So if a round doesn't complete and there's 200 properties that have not been collected that day, they are recorded as 200 failures, not one failure.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, it's gone right. Yeah, it's just on the waste collection recycling theme again. On the graph, which talks about percentage of household waste.
We were going to come to the graph, so.
Oh, we're not talking about the graphs here.
Well, we're going to go start at page 21 in a moment.
Okay.
Once we dealt with the report, so if we could come back.
All right.
Sorry, I'll start again. Page 21. Councillor Hobart, do you want to say anything, or do any of the officers wish to speak to this, the graphs on page 21?
No, I don't think I've got anything further to add.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, and it's picking up on what Councillor Thomas said really about members appreciating, and I thank Councillor Thomas for his kind words. Is as well as having to work from home, which is on a permanent basis for the last 2 years, the council staff have had to undertake a lot of additional duties as well. And the example that Mr. Davis gave around the COVID grants, we're now on another tranche of COVID grants, and we've actually got, I think, 3 additional pieces of work to do, one around business rates, one around grants for leisure and hospitality, and a further round of funding for ARG funding. And all that was announced sort of just literally just before Christmas, and the money has to be got out of our bank accounts by the end of March. So that puts a massive pressure on the team that at this time of the year would be processing council tax, making sure the council tax and the business rate bills all go out when they're due to go out at the beginning of March. And actually, I think the performance reflects quite good performance in relation to all that additional work as well. And I thank Councillor Thomas for recognising it. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just add to that? Mr. Molyneux beat me to it, but I was going to say exactly the same at the end. I think that the way that these stats, I was going to wait to see what others picked up on first, but the way these stats show is, I think it's a testament to the staff, and I think members really need to realise how hard, well, you do realise obviously how hard the staff are working, and the stats still hold up. And I'd like to, and I hope we all would join in thanking the staff of South Hams, including, from everybody, to say that although the additional workload has been vast, the stats hold up, and that is because it's a testament to the staff that are committed to South Hams. And I think we all need to recognise that we are very lucky to have such loyal staff, who I know many, when I phoned them, have been suffering from COVID, but still answered the phone, still done their work because they've been able to work from home. And I thank them all for that. But I was going to say that at the end. Thank you.
Okay. Page 21. Are there any questions on page 21? Oh, Councillor Callum.
Yeah, it's just, can we get a bit more interpretation? I'm not the best on graphs. What we've got, the graph on collections missed seems to show that more collections were being missed, going from September up to November in total, and recycling in particular. Does that show that actually the picture was improving, moving from July to October? I'm not entirely sure, but can we get an update on what the situation is for missed collections, please, if possible?
Can I take that? So on the missed collections, so from April to October, it was purely based on the number of missed collections that were reported by customers. So that peaked in September and then began to drop in October. And then from November onwards, if a round wasn't completed, that number includes both the missed collections that were reported by customers and any households that weren't collected on a round by 5 p.m. the following day. So if it was missed if it wasn't able to be collected on a Tuesday, for example, if it wasn't collected by the following Wednesday evening, then it gets marked as a missed report, irrespective of whether a customer actually reports it as a missed bin, which is why it's, even though the situation was getting better in October, the numbers look worse for November and onwards. And then with regards to the percentage of household waste percent for reuse and recycling, I would imagine that we rely on this data from Devon County and FCC. I would imagine it's just a quirk on their reporting. It's always late coming in. The corresponding September in West Devon was actually higher, so I think it's probably just higher than average. So I think it's probably just a delay in their reporting. There is an increase in actual waste being thrown away as well, which will affect the figure somewhat. But I think it'll probably come back up as the data comes in for the rest of the year.
Just to add that, the first graph on the top of that page, NI 192, the word that's broken off there is reuse, recycling and composting. And of course, at that point, we suspended the garden waste service. So there's a corresponding reduction in the amount of material that's sent for composting. So that's why the graph goes down quite dramatically in August and September. So.
Can I just ask on that same point, on that same graph, NI 191, if I'm interpreting the heading right, is anything else, if it might be other than 192, but the waste that's not going to landfill or whatever is going up, and it's part of that because people are actually putting more and more waste into their black bins, rather than actually trying to do it in the right way, whether they're allowed to do it or not. I don't know if that makes sense.
I understand your question. I don't have enough information to be able to say what that increase is. I could speculate, but I don't have the facts, so I'd rather wait and get you the answer after the meeting, if that's okay, Councillor Spencer.
I think the reason I mention that is because I'm aware from people that I talk to who are quietly saying, well, we're just putting stuff into the black bin because, you know, it goes into the black bin, it's not seen, we can't, you know, we haven't got huge amounts of garden waste at the moment, but where we have got it, it goes into a black bag, into the black bin, and other things as well. So I wonder if that's true across the board.
I would suspect that, but I can't confirm it.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Where are the figures on food waste? Because that's a particular one that really gets me going. The very fact that we, as a nation, throw away a third of the food that we produce. We need to discourage the food waste one way or another, get it cut down, because that does really aggravate me, and there's no need for the amount of food waste that's happening at the present time.
So in terms of the food waste would be in that top left-hand graph, but I agree with your sentiments, Councillor Voss. I think there's far too much wastage. Can I just a point of clarification from Councillor Spencer's comments? Councillor Spencer talked about the residual waste and landfill. I would reiterate none of our waste goes to landfill, but you'd be surprised how many residents, even when I talk to residents, they just assume that their black bin goes to landfill, like they assume recycling gets shipped off to another country, and none of that happens when it's worth. But it doesn't matter what we say and how we progress it. People still assume that because that's what used to happen many years ago.
Okay. We can now move on to page 22. Could an explanation be given as to the 78A1 and 78B? Can those please? Can we just have some more information on that, please, Mr. Davis?
Certainly. So yes, so 78A. A1 is the process speed for new claims. So the target or the government target is below 24 days, and I don't think we've reached that target at all in the last 3 years. So we're still well below target, around 17 days for December. And then change of circumstances, so we get a lot more of these than we get new claims, and it drops off in December. The target for that, the government target, I believe, is 11 days. So again, we're well below target for that. And I would imagine that the drop in December is as we were receiving fewer phone calls in December, there's more capacity there to actually do the processing work rather than answer calls.
So when you make reference to claims, what kind of claims are you referring to?
Benefit claims.
Benefit claim, okay. Right. Right. Any questions on page 20? Any questions on page 22? No. Okay. 23. I think we've dealt with calls. Yes. Any questions on 23? No. 24. Any questions on 24? 25. And 26. Councillor Spencer.
Sorry to be a pain. What appears on 26 is the black line, the quarterly targets in the top two graphs. And the targets were mentioned earlier on other graphs that are in these displays, in this report. And could I suggest that it would be very handy to know what those targets are, if I have to have them put into the same graphs next time, so that we know what the expectation is and whether we're riding above or below.
Mr. Davis or Councillor Hock, could you answer that?
Yes, certainly. A lot of the measures we report to ONS aren't targeted, but yes, we can certainly put those in. I think with regards to the benefits targets, they're well above them. I'm not entirely sure they would even fit on the graph, but we can certainly put them in. It would flatten the graph down as we're doing reasonably well. But yes, we can certainly put them in.
Councillor Smurden.
Yeah, thank you. I guess probably a question for Mr. Davis. On the one, the left-hand one there where it says South SH sickness, Southam sickness, the left-hand axis of that graph goes up 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And the blue line is, long. That can't be, it can't be 500 employees. Am I interpreting this wrong? How does that work?
That's the numbers of days of sickness over the quarter, the total number of days. So one person being off for a week would be 5. One person off for a month would be around 20, 21 days.
Right.
So with long-term sickness, obviously you have a lot fewer instances for a lot longer, whereas short-term sicknesses would be just days, day or two here and there.
Right. Okay. Fair. So really, yeah, to drill further into that sort of needs to be pulled apart a bit. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on page 25? 26.
Please, Chairman. I think we should probably just note in 157A that we, looking at the target, the process of determining that's showing a good news story, is it not? Or am I reading that the wrong way around? That we are above the target in terms of processing applications.
Is that okay? That's
Yep. So for quarter 3, the value was 92.3% and the target is 60%. So obviously major applications are fewer in number. So it can be a measure that jumps around a little bit if you only get a few majors in a quarter. But yeah, good news story.
okay. So if we, Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, quickly, on planning cases, planning enforcement cases received and closed and outstanding. Do we have any target levels there? because we've had the previous page with a fabulous set of target lines, but there doesn't seem to be, and I know that most councillors in this meeting and indeed in council in general are always interested in enforcement and enforcement time and turnover. It's just, are there any targets that we need to have on there?
There aren't any targets aside from we want to close more cases than we receive, which is what we've been achieving for the last year or two. So it's been coming into control, but no, there isn't a set target for, fundamentally because we have no control over the number of cases received, same for planning applications.
Okay. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, as a member of the D&M committee, it's quite nice that actually the fact there are some enforcement cases that I know of at the moment that the enforcement side has improved recently quite a lot, because we went through a staff change, but now they seem to be, I would explain it like a dog after a whatever, you know, they're really getting into it and drilling down and getting some of the aggravating ones that we've been wanting to get rid of. So yeah, in general, the enforcement and the planning side are working really hard at what they're doing.
So is that a result of, I think the staff increased in the enforcement section, didn't it? Was that the case?
Yeah, and going on the other side, we've got more staff coming into the planning side as well over the next 3 months, I think it is, which should improve that. But when you consider we had 870 applications come in the month of November last year, you know, I mean, it's quite a, you know, it was a pre-Christmas rush, and then you got a rush after Christmas as well. But again, yeah, I take this opportunity of saying I think the staff are working really hard at that job, but the enforcement is definitely better than it was.
Chairman, could I move an amendment, please? The recommendation stands but follows. The overview scrutiny notes performance figures shown in the Botana report attached to Appendix A and acknowledges the hard work of South Ham staff through extraordinarily difficult circumstances.
I
think it speaks for itself, Chairman.
Hand over to an officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I will. The Council adopted its Better Lives for All strategy in September 21, alongside detailed thematic delivery plans for each priority area. This report provides a thematic update on the climate and biodiversity strand of the Better Lives for All strategy. I draw your attention to members' attention to Appendix A, which provides the update in more detail. Members will note that of the activities set out in the strategy, 4 are on track, 1 is slightly off track, and 1 is not due to commence until later in the financial year. The actions in the Better Lives for All strategy relating to climate change from our key priorities for the year ahead and are pulled from our larger climate change and biodiversity strategy, of which an update will follow this item. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll hand over to officers for any questions members might have.
Can I just hang of this? Can I suggest that the way we deal with this is to deal with it item by item that's on as in the appendix. And if members will turn to page 33, you'll see that it starts at AM 1.1. That's the first item. I'd like to propose that we deal with that item first and then move on to AM 1.2. So can we deal with AM 1.1 first? So would an officer like to speak to that item before we ask for questions?
Yeah, I can do that, Chair.
Mr. Powell.
So AM 1.1 is around converting our fleet, our light fleet, to electric vehicles. At this stage, we had a dedicated officer allocated to do this project. That officer ended up actually being diverted to other work during the pandemic. So we're in the process of seconding an officer into the team to do this. It's quite a wide-ranging project. It's not just about changing the vehicles themselves, it's about the working practices. Because, for example, at the moment, some officers will take vehicles back to their properties. We need to ensure that they're able to charge. Now, installing just charging points at the depot would mean that everyone would have to travel to the depot to pick up the vehicles. So there's a number of HR issues here which we're looking at the moment. Then there's the physical infrastructure of charging points both at depots and across the district. And then there's the type of vehicle that will deliver the service we need. So at this stage, we're in that feasibility stage. We've got a project officer coming in who will look at all those components and report back. I think the eye on the goal here is that in 3 years' time we have a full electric fleet. So we've done our best to try and put those stages into the Better Lives for All thematic delivery plan. You'll note that one of the first points in this year was to actually install the charging at the depot. That isn't going to be delivered by March, but clearly it doesn't matter if we haven't got that in place because we haven't got the vehicles yet. So it's a question of a critical path, really. We've secured the funding for that, which is set out, £170,000, and that will form part of the project as it goes forward. I think that's all I'd say at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Could I ask a question from the Chair, just by reference to the thematic delivery plan that was approved by Council? In respect of, and by reference to this document, the scope requirements and hold initial discussions with providers re-feasibility, and then it says upgrade to power to depot and Fullerton House and install electric charging points. It says upgrades complete by March 2022. I don't think that's going to happen, is it?
No, Chair, it isn't. It's one of those things that, as a result of not having the relevant officer in place, we've not been able to progress that. To say it's not part of the critical path at this stage because we'll need that infrastructure in place when we've actually replaced the vehicle fleet. We have electric charging points here at the moment, but so that has drifted a little bit. But as I say, it's not part of the critical path at this stage.
And then the next one, it says feasibility study and forward fleet plan developed to improve infrastructure in depots to help facilitate transition to EV fleet, etc. It says feasibility study and forward fleet plan produced by March 2023. But will that happen?
Certainly, yeah, that we're very much in line to deliver that, Chair.
Yeah, by March 20, right. And then finally, it says the council implement a full electric vehicle fleet for our environmental management service. It says the council has a full electric vehicle fleet by March 2024. So are we on target for that?
At this stage, certainly that's the intention. It's a project there's various components, as I've explained, hopefully to members, that we need to put in place. That's the intention, to have a full EV fleet by 2024.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Foss.
Not so much a question, Chairman. It's more of the electric charging points is one of the issue on the planning side. We haven't been able to insist that electric charging points have been put into housing and such like. We're a bit behind on that, but we need the legislation to come down to be able to achieve that. And I just wonder whether there's any way we can encourage through grants or whatever people that've got private areas that are prepared to put charging points in, so that they'll be open to the public. But that's what we need to be looking at, because it's great going electric, but we need the infrastructure in place. And we need to encourage people wherever we can to put the infrastructure in.
Councillor Foss, can I just stop? That's actually item 5. We're coming to that in a moment. Yeah. Yeah, you're jumping the gun. Okay. Right. Any other questions on item 1 or comments? No. Okay, if we could then move on to AM 1.2. Mr. Powell, do you want to say a few words about this?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So with respect to this one, the first thing is to commission a feasibility study as to what the opportunities are for renewable energy on our assets. So that includes our car parks and our buildings. We have commissioned a report, which we've had. It is being reviewed at the moment by officers. It gives us some of the answers which we already knew. It doesn't give us some of the answers that perhaps we need to know. So we'll be looking at further developing a feasibility study to see what our options are. I think the key with this is we know that we could put, for example, PV on our car parks. We have to consider whether that's the right thing to do. There's a lot of issues around a big capital investment of that nature, and when we understand the costs and the risks involved with that, then that was something we'll bring back to members to determine alongside the other priorities that we have. The key thing with, for example, putting PV on car parks is trying to find an end user in the proximity of that car park, because you can't always get the power onto the grid otherwise, and storage and battery storage is still in development. So at this stage, it is a question of determining what the art of the possible is, and then determining what the best option is in terms of our wider ambitions on climate change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. On the thematic delivery plan that was approved by Council, it said the feasibility study commission will be complete by March 2022. Is that going to need to be extended?
No, not at this stage. We've already had a feasibility study which we're reviewing at the moment. Yeah. There will be other questions potentially which may take us into the next year, but we've delivered against that first action because we have that study.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Snowden.
Yeah, can I just ask Mr. Powell? You're talking about car parks, etc. One of the biggest car parks which we own, but I'm not 100% sure that we control, is the one at Tesco's at Lee Mill, which is, as from my estimation, is about 3 or 4 acres of dead flat tarmac, which would be fairly easy to put solar panels on. I just wonder whether that one was being included.
My understanding is obviously that is leased to Tesco's, so it would be within their gift as to whether or not they wanted to do that. It's something we could consider in partnership, but it hasn't been looked at specifically. But we're looking at the concept really at the moment, and then if we would decide that a particular car park had an end user, that might be one we'd progress. Clearly, Tesco's is an end user, so it might be something we could consider in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Okay, I just wanted to ask some questions about this. The previous item here, I assume that the EV report came from apps, guided some of this, or will be guiding some of this. I've read that report, and I must admit, I think it's a waste of £757,500. It starts off, and unfortunately I haven't got my laptop, I had to take some notes, but so I'm having to do this from memory, but it starts off talking about scope 3 as being completely impossible, which is utter nonsense. Of course, scope 3 is something that can be addressed. It's not as easy as scopes 1 and 2, but it's doable and ought to be addressed because it represents quite a big chunk of where emissions come from. One of the good things it does is it recognises that traffic is an important part of the problem. I think it quotes 27%, and it makes a reference to the fact that 45 actions in the action plan and only one to do with traffic, and says that this is unbalanced. Now, I could have told you that, and I have actually been saying that for quite a long time, and I would have done it for free. And then the final point is that it makes it says you've got 10 years. Well, I mean, it's enough to make you want to bang your head on the table, really. We've got 5 years in which to halve emissions, and there isn't anybody who knows anything about this would not disagree with that. So for them to say that the council's got 10 years to come up with a plan, I think is just absurd. And given the quality of this report and the I mean, it's a very lightweight report, and it doesn't actually give you any indication as to what your strategy should be. It just lists the things you've got to think about, which you probably knew anyway, I would have thought. So I hope that when they come up with a report for the PV over the council's assets, car parks, and they do a much better job. Now, you have this report, and I believe you've had it for a month or so now. I think I don't know why, when it goes to be reviewed, I'm not quite sure what that process is. It seems to take quite a long time, and I would like to see it, like today, really. I mean, I think members should see these things as they come in through the door, really. So yes, I mean, those were the points I would like to draw your attention to.
Yeah, if I can try and take those 3 points, I think, Councillor, I think the first one around Scope 3 emissions, I mean, the report, it does state that. I think as at the moment, as an authority, we've said that we will be net zero by 2030, including Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. Now, that is a huge challenge. Scope 3 emissions, for members' information, are the ones we have very little control over. So they're to do with the services we buy in, the supplies, procurement, and so on, and other elements of vehicle use as well. So, you know, we aren't in control of a lot of those. A lot of authorities who have made great progress and talk from the in the press about the fact they'll be net zero by 2025, 26, for example, haven't included Scope 3 emissions in that calculation. We've declared that we will. So I think it is a fair point to say it's difficult. It's not impossible, as you say. And it's something that we are tackling as part of our action plan. Yeah.
My point was not that you're not tackling it, but that you've commissioned a report in which it's made a statement, which I think is just plain wrong.
Okay, yeah, no, I accept that. I think in terms of the report itself, without wishing to say too much in a public meeting, it gave us some information. It didn't give us all the information. We knew most of it, but in some ways, getting something that reinforces your understanding is helpful. There is a further action in here and within the climate change plan to develop a proper EV strategy, which sets out our ambition in terms of our own fleet and setting up a network of charging points to facilitate the move to electric vehicles. So that is a piece of work that we're doing. This helps inform it, not hugely, I would agree. And in terms of the other report and making that available, when I say it's under review, the first report we had on EV had a number of inaccuracies in it. And so it wasn't a report that I felt that would be circulated to members or that we should act on, because it was based on discussions between officers and the consultants at APSI. So until we've checked that the report is accurate and doesn't contain anything that in the public domain would be incorrect, then that's the process. I will more than happily circulate that report when we're through from that process, which should be very shortly.
Okay, can I just come back? Very quickly. I mean, it's just that the fact that you've had to go through several iterations with apps to get a report that was past muster is deeply worrying. I mean, and that you're going to then base your strategy for EV on a report from the same organisation that did such a lousy job on the first one. Yeah, I mean, that's really the only point I want to make.
Well, I'd just like to comment that we're not basing our report and our strategy based on one document that we've commissioned from a particular organisation. We're working with a wide range of partners, both across the community and fellow authorities. The challenge of converting the fleet, for example, to EV is one that's faced by all local authorities. We are in a group of other authorities within Devon who, and we are working closely with them to try and find the best solution to this. And as I say, it's not just a technical solution, it's also a working practice HR solution. I mean, that's been going on this week, hasn't it? So we won't just look at one document. I'll assure members that that's not the case.
Yeah, Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman, I just wanted to finish off, you quite understandably explained that this is coming up. It seems to me we know we want to go electric. We know it's not rocket science. Wherever that is, to put in EV, put charging points, you have to have 3-phase. We know that needs to be near where you've got people parking. We've got a lot of car parks, and I mean, it's not a silly suggestion that Councillor Smurton mentioned about Tesco's car park. A lot of people go there to shop. I know there's a downside of that, but there's other places that they could go. We should be encouraging or find a way of encouraging people to put in EV points, not just us as a council, but find a way of encouraging others to put in charging points so they're available to the general public. And I think it's not rocket science to my mind, and I've always been a person of the practical side rather than navel gazing, and get on with it. We know what we need to do. We know the best places to do it without messing around too much, to be quite blunt.
Thank you. Okay. Right, if we could move on to 1.3, there's no point in discussing it because that's not yet due to proceed. Am I right in saying that, Mr. Powell?
Yes, Chair, that's obviously not an action until next year.
Right, 1.4, which deals with mainly to deal with funding and in particular crowdfunding. Please, could you add to the report and set out what the position is on this, please?
Yeah, I can answer those questions. So in terms of our climate change and biodiversity action fund on crowdfunder, there's been a bit of a complication there because Devon County Council advised they're going to be withdrawing from crowdfunder, and at the moment they heavily subsidise our platform fees. So as a result of them withdrawing, if we were to continue past May, we would be liable for the full platform cost, which is much more significant than what we pay at the moment. So we're going to be looking at alternative platforms of crowdfunding to help deliver that £100,000 we've got set aside. And then alongside that, we've obviously got the direct grant scheme, which we had approved at executive last year. So I've been working on the framework of what that looks like, and hopefully we'll get that up and running in February. Planning to be quite light touch, so we want to, it's obviously going to be directed around community engagement, but we'll be looking to take kind of an expression of interest kind of exercise first, and then sift out those expressions of interest and then invite more detailed applications from those whoever applies at a time. So that's on track to be delivered as well.
Yeah, just two questions. First of all, why are Devon County Council withdrawing? That's the first question. The second question is, if we need to make certain that this initiative continues, what will be the additional costs for this council from May onwards to allow this the crowdfunding scheme to continue, but clearly just in our name?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not too sure why Devon County Council decided to withdraw. They said, I mean, they've been having quite good success with their crowdfunding over the last few years, but I haven't been privy to those conversations about why they've decided to withdraw from it. In terms of the platform cost, I think at the moment we pay about £5,000, and I think that would swell up to about £25,000.
So sorry, so the additional cost to us for it to continue will be
£25,000, I think.
£25,000, and for how long is that for?
A year.
It's for a year. So in other words, if we wanted to continue, if this council wanted the scheme to continue beyond May, it will need to find £25,000. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Powell.
Got Mr. Hawke on the Teams call, who took some additional information about the scheme. Perhaps you could invite him to it.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Chairman. Just to add that we are currently having discussions with other Devon councils because they are all in the same boat, because Devon County subsidised the platform for all other Devon councils and Devon and Cornwall Police. So I've arranged some demos with alternative platforms. The first one is next week. As Mr. Williams has said, indicative costs, so that we are looking at £25,000 to £30,000 a year. But if possible, and if we can share that with some other councils in Devon, we will look to do so. So we should get some clarity on that in the next couple of weeks. And the reason that Devon are no longer going to support it is that it's been put forward as part of their package of savings, as a small contribution to the many millions of pounds that Devon County are trying to save this year. So it may be that Devon County Council don't support that through the budget setting process, but at the moment it's looking like it will be supported. But we can't preempt that. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'll get this right with this next. Right, Councillor Hoskin.
If I just might make a quick comment, Chairman, we've already made a move to work, if you like, in parallel with crowdfunding, and I think maybe we could move all the money in that direction. I think the take-up has been probably less than £25,000 so far, hasn't it, on crowdfunding? So I think we've sort of got an arrangement there that we could beef up.
What about our county councillors? Can they assist in this process?
Chairman, through you, I am a county councillor. I regret that I do not belong to the ruling body at County Hall, but I will do my best, as always I do.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm coming on that one. Yeah, so just a bit of an update. The obviously the Letty scheme that we've been running with Devon County Council and other Devon partners is progressing. From what I understand, with conversations with Emma Widdicombe, who's been looking after this project, is the process has been quite laborious so far. Mostly because of complications with Scottish Power, but I'm told that we're nearly at the end of that now. So as the report details that we've signed the initial lease for the charging bay and Mayors Avenue, but because all of that background legal work is now done, the next tranche of sites will happen a lot quicker. So I'm told that we'll have the entire set of charging points through the Letty scheme delivered by, kind of gone through the process by within 12 months.
Sorry to be tedious on this, but the thematic delivery plan that was approved by council a short while ago states that as far as EV installations in public car parks, there will be 9 installations by the 31st of March 2022, and then it goes for 4 more installations in public car parks through ORCS, again by the 31st of March 2022. And yet you say in the report that we're on track. There seems to be a sort of conflict there.
Yeah, I think, we're on track in terms of the 3-year plan, but in terms of the 9 this year, no, they've drifted as a result of, things outside of our control. So what we have done, Chair, is in the detailed integrated performance management update we take to the executive, we've added some comments into that nature, and we've changed it from green to an amber. I think it's important for members to appreciate this is the first update we've done in this format, so we'd welcome comments about how we do it. I think we've gone for the green. The main project is on target, rather than a sort of incremental each stage. But in true project management approach, you would put it down as an amber. So quite happy to take that as a recommendation from the committee today to change that from a green to an amber.
So The 9 installations that should be delivered by the 31st of March, that's not going to be achieved. So what is the new date?
From my understanding from Emma, that it will be within the next 12 months. So when we make minor amendments to the delivery plans, which will be done in 6 months, we will change that deadline based on what we know. I think it's important again to point out that we adopted this in September, and we put dates in that we thought were realistic for certain projects like this, where you rely on third parties do drift, not as a result of the council's activity, but you know, that's the situation we're in.
So it's drift by a year.
We're working on a year basis, as Chairman, aren't we?
And what about the 4 installations on the involving ORCS? What that should have been the 31st of March 2022. What's the fresh date on that?
So there will probably be a bit of a delay on that one as well. So from what I've been told is Devon County Council is still going through the procurement exercise for that project at the moment. So that may drift beyond March 2022 as well.
Okay. Can you just remind members as to what ORCS means?
It's the on-street residential charging scheme.
All right. This is in working with Devon County Council.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, fine. Right, questions? Councillor Callahan.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? I know there are 2 different sort of schemes running. This is one of the things I'm not asked about frequently, and it gets rather tedious sort of every time having to push back the date. First of all, we're told about the initial lease has been signed in Dartmouth, which is great, but what about elsewhere in the district? Okay, I'm obviously councillor for Kingsbridge. Last I heard was a report from Emma Widdicombe talking about ECB's charging points in Kingsbridge in June. So that local people, probably rather foolishly. So is that now no longer correct? And is Dartmouth sort of somehow going ahead more quickly than other towns? If so, why?
Okay, I'm not too sure why Dartmouth was put above on top of the pack of where those EV chargers were going, but in terms of the leases on the other side, as I said before, because of the complications with the leasing arrangements and legal processes with Scottish Power to sort that out, now that that's done, the lease framework's already been done, so those future leases will happen a lot quicker.
So is June right for, I think it was certainly in Kingsbridge, it was 2 of the main car parks in June, and then under the other scheme it was going to be the end of the year for the other 2.
Okay.
So is that still on track or not?
I'll have to get an update from Emma and provide that to you separately. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. You're obviously talking about issues with procurement and leasing. Can you clarify whether there are particular issues with the actual infrastructure, Western Power, the cabling? Because I keep hearing issues that, their ability to respond or the actual infrastructure's ability to respond is potentially one of the biggest stumbling blocks for EV charging points.
Yeah, you're pretty much spot on there. So the way I'm told it works is the lease gets signed first, and then Western Power sort out the cabling and infrastructure after. So that's part of the reason for the delays as well.
Yeah, it seems a sort of a bit of a strange way that we're agreeing something goes in, and then we, wait for Western Power to decide whether they can actually install. And we know, I have personal experience of how slow Western Power can be in things. And I think most people have any infrastructure like that. So, even if we get the procurement and the leasing all signed up, potentially we could see more delays. And is there some way that we can sort of fast track? Because, this is not just here, this is right across the country with every piece of infrastructure, but it's key to it. Is there any way that we can actually, put a rocket under the infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, Emma's definitely been doing that. She's been getting quite cross on the phone a couple of times in meetings. But in terms of the issues with Western Power, the sites do go through a survey first. So it's not a case of the sites may drop off after the lease is signed, because we wouldn't go through the lease arrangement unless we were confident the charges could go in the first place. So it just goes within Western Power's processes and work programs and things.
I believe that the county had a project to put charging points on lampposts at one point. My understanding is that there is a huge resource there, because they've all gone to LED lights, and so the network is under capacity, and it doesn't cost very much to put a charging point on a lamppost. There are issues as to whether they're on the inside or the outside of a pavement, and etc. But there is a huge demand. I've had several people ask me who live in houses that haven't got off-street parking, is there any possibility of getting these things? And when I investigated, there was a project ongoing, and then at some point I was told, no, it's been cancelled. Do you know why it was cancelled? Was there ever one? And if not, why not? Really, because this seems to be a cheap way of getting quite a lot of charging points out there.
Yeah, I'll have to probably come back to you on the complications with the lamppost charging. I understand that Devon County Council are doing that through the on-street residential charging scheme, but for whatever reason, we've opted to select car parks that are in locations where there isn't a lot of scope for places to have off-street charging.
He's waiting.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Baldry, would you like to speak? Oh, sorry, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm getting the feedback now. Is that all right? First of all, apologies for not being at the start of the meeting. I missed the start of this discussion, but Emma Widdicombe is still on the site visit I was on, so she is not available. And I noticed that on my screen it says committee member, and of course I'm not a committee member. I haven't got the technical ability to get rid of that. I am as frustrated as everyone else about the slow putting out of the electric charging points. We are chasing as much as possible, as I think has already been said. It is mainly outside our hands, and not least with problems with Western Power. On the answer about Devon County Council and using street lights as a charging point, I am amazed that Devon County Council have walked away from this idea. I would like to know the reasons why it has been done. So in summary, Chairman, I am apologising for the fact that we're not getting on with it, but it remains a very high priority for the parking team.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry. Any other questions on this? Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to make the point that the wiring for a lamp is considerably smaller than the wiring for power, and it would have been seen as an unnecessary extravagance to have put heavy copper cables to all the street lights. In retrospect, yes, you could rewire them all with heavy cable, but we're talking about probably a minimum of 7 kilowatts, which is 30 amps. Now, an awful lot of lighting circuits have copper cable that's capable of carrying, recommended for 5 amps. So I think, yeah, that could well be one of the reasons. And okay, fine, they can rewire them all, but it's not quite as simple as putting a socket on the side of the lamppost, wiring it into the power and saying, get on with it.
Sorry, Councillor Mackay, you're hovering with your hand. Can we not get too much into a debate about lampposts?
But there's been lots of other councils do it, and the lighting circuits, as I understand it, are much more resilient than what you're suggesting. 5 amps. I mean, that's and because the street lighting used to be very inefficient, and now it's been changed to LEDs. There's a lot of spare capacity in the lighting circuit. That is my understanding, and like I say, lots of other councils have done this. So, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Just like I made sort of a wider comment about this. I mean, this is one strand of the approach to reduce carbon emissions from transport. Putting an EV charging framework and a strategy which we're developing is vitally important. But there's other elements of this which we're doing directly. So we're promoting EV vehicles among our staff through a scheme with NHS Solutions. We're also obviously part of the wider Devon Carbon Plan, which is looking at active travel, looking at public transport. So, you know, this is here. It's focused in our delivery plan because we have an element of control over it, clearly from some of the delays, not full control. But the wider Devon Carbon Plan deals with this in a holistic manner. So, you know, we are supporting that process as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Any other questions on this? So, Councillor Spencer, you got your hand up, or?
Kind of. Yeah.
Kind of.
I'm slightly hesitant to ask this question, and it appears on the surface of it to be exceptionally naive. But can we go back to basics and say, do we actually understand what the need is for charging points? Do we know how many we should be having? Do we know what their usage is or likely to be? Because if the motor manufacturers are all converting their products to electric or to carbon or whatever to hydrogen or whatever they're going to use, and they're stretching the range of the cars that they're building or intending to build from 50 miles to 500 miles, if you like, then are we actually providing these vehicles, these charging points for residents or tourists, or why are we providing them if you've got a 500-mile range on a car? You know, there's not many people that leave home to go to Tesco's and then go to see Dartmoor or whatever it is, and then get back home and have done 500 miles in a day, such that they can't plug the damn thing in. Plug the thing back in when they get back home. So I know it's a really naive question, but it's a very fundamental one. Do we actually understand what the need is?
Mr. Powell.
It's certainly not a naive question. It's exactly the question that I think everyone's asking now. Since the sort of Diletti scheme came about a few years ago now, unfortunately, you know, things have changed. You know, there will be no new diesel and petrol vehicles from 2030 and so on. So, and the majority of people now who purchase an electric vehicle will have a charging point at home. You can charge one from a 3-pin plug. So whether or not putting them in public car parks and other areas is actually the way forward, it is a very good question. So, you know, we are trying to ensure through our work with Devon and with partners that we are going to intervene in the right place. Whether that's, as mentioned earlier on, through planning to ensure that EV charging points are installed on new builds, by supporting the government scheme that takes £500 potentially off a installation of an EV charging point, and the scheme we've got, for example, for staff, which secures a charging point at home as part of the deal with leasing a vehicle. So yeah, we have data on usage, which helps inform that. But I think you're right. I think you'll need a network of charging points for people to be able to network on motorways and on certain key points. But the majority of charging will take place at home where people have the ability to put a charging point in. If you live in a block of flats or similar, then the on-street parking, which the AUK scheme starts to address, will also be key. It is incredibly complex, and we're doing our best to try and ensure that our input to that is a positive one, but certainly not a naive question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Spencer.
Can I just follow up? So part of my question was, how many points are we aiming for, and what's the time scale?
So
that's in the plan that was approved. I think it was 9 installations by no, it's 9 and 4. It's 13 at the moment. It's 13 at the moment. That's what's in the plan at the moment. That's correct, isn't it?
that's correct, because that's through schemes that are already funded through Deleti and Orcs. What we're looking at in next year is to develop, well, from April, is to develop a wider EV strategy for South Hams, which will determine whether or not, you know, us financing, supporting installation in more car parks is the right way forward, or whether or not we should, you know, and all the other components such as the planning side of things. So that will help us shape what the most appropriate intervention and action we can take is. At the moment, there's 13 there. If the government bring out new schemes to put more in place, then no doubt we would consider those and try and lever as much finance as we can in to support the infrastructure in our area.
Councillor Spencer, can I just say that there is a regular complaint by tourists and visitors, certainly to Totnes, that there's an acute shortage of electrical vehicle charging points. You know, that's coming through loud and clear, certainly as far as Totnes is concerned. I think they are, aren't they?
There were like 4.
No, they're not. They're not. Some of the 9 are. Yeah. Councillor Mackay.
Can I ask a simple question that relates to all of this in terms of the lighting thing anyway, but is how many, do we have a statistic as to the number of homes or dwellings or whatever you want to call them that actually have off-street parking relative to the number of people who live in the South Hams?
Is that information available?
Not that I'm aware of at this stage. It's something that would be relevant to the EV strategy. I certainly agree, but I'm not aware of it at the moment. We're gathering information on, at the moment, if you see within the action plan, when we're gathering information on the number of electric vehicles in the area and stuff like that to try and compile a better picture. But no, I couldn't give you a response to that at this stage.
Okay. Councillor Brazil wants to speak. You've got your hand up. Would you like to speak, Councillor Brazil?
Yeah, thank you, John. Just to say, I mean, you raised the point. You raised the point already about tourism. You know, it's one of those self-fulfilling. If we don't have any electric charging points, we won't have any need because people won't come here. They'll just press on to Cornwall, where they will have charging points. You know, as with all these things, we managed to put up incredible hurdles in the way of something that is so obvious that we need to get on with. That's why it does. That's why we don't deliver it. I mean, we should develop a book of reasons why we can't do things and why we can't crack on with it. And because I think that we've got loads and loads of examples from this council that we could put into that book. You know, it's just incredibly disappointing that we are failing to take on board that this is an emergency and we need to get on with it. And not only that, that if we don't do that, it's going to be detrimental to our tourism industry. And if senior members and officers can't see that, then they need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Before we move on, you mentioned, Mr. Powell, that the overall rating that you've given is green, on track. I think presumably members of the committee would accept your proposal that be put to amber, as it is not on track. So do we all agree that we accept Mr. Powell's proposal that be relegated to or reduced to amber? Yes? Okay. If we can then do the last item, 1.6 is the biodiversity on council land. Mr. Powell?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, as you know, the consultation on the GM review took place last year, and we had overwhelming support in terms of changing our GM procedure over to improve biodiversity and wildlife value. So at the moment, Rob's kind of developed what that looks like and how much is needed and what sort of equipment we need, and that report will be going to executive next week.
Questions? I know this might seem, you know, fully supporting and appreciate this sort of move. and the fact that we're consulting on it. I have had, and I'm looking at now a question that was raised as to ensuring that wild grass and flower meadows are not too close to homes. And this has been raised by a couple of people and others where children have allergies and wind blown. I know this seems extreme, asthma, eczema, hay fever. I'm only raising this because it's been put to me by local residents who have concerns and restrict their own gardens and things like that, and whether this has actually been considered. I know it's relatively small, but it is a potential issue.
So I don't know what sites have been selected for changeover. I know Rob's be undertaking a mapping exercise for proposed sites, so I will feed that back to him.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, if I can just say, I think everybody, the commitment for tree planting, wildflower meadows, as long as it's done sympathetically and well across the area, I think would be supported by most people, and would hope that others in the community, landowners, sort of move ahead in this sort of area as well. And I know, sitting across from Richard, I know there are a number of farmers that are already doing this and have been doing this for, a fair while now, so it's good to see that it's happening.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is quite in the right place, but anyway, I'll get in earlier. It's about weed killer. It's not specifically related to this, I suppose, but can I just clarify? We don't use weed killer as a council on council sites anymore. With somebody.
But yeah, but I'm not too sure. I don't think we do, but I'll ask Rob to see if that's the case.
Yeah, because I would hope that we don't, and that we perhaps publicise the fact that we don't, because obviously we want to keep all our bees and our insects and everything. And I think we should take a lead on this, and hopefully we are.
Yes. If I can answer that, as long as the science behind it is correct, I would agree with that. But some of the science has been banded around about certain chemicals has been proved to be totally wrong. There is one particular one that is very bad for bees, and that has been banned. But when you get onto the glyphosate thing, that was purely a political thing blown up in Germany. And I won't go into details now, but if Denise, you want to talk to me about it afterwards, I'll explain what I was going to say.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hopwood who wishes to speak. Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we don't. I know that this council doesn't use any weed killer that has banned substances in it, and the weed killer that's been trialling for the last 12 months is environmentally friendly.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the section on key risks and issues, and mindful that both Mr. Powell and Mr. Molyneux are in this room, could I just point out that the first paragraph there is exceptionally important to this process. I have a parish in my ward where an environment group has run a similar scheme to this, but rather larger than 10%, in fact. And the phrase robust communications plan is utterly essential, because actually the presumption that council land is being neglected will be exceedingly speedily jumped upon, and robust is absolutely the word. And I do encourage officers to make absolutely sure that the consultation process that we went through before is followed up with regular publicity. Thank you, Chairman.
If I can have some clarification, I note that a lot of the grounds maintenance team are using equipment which is electric and rechargeable, moving away from petrol strimmers, leaf blowers. Has that been fully achieved, or is that part of the programme to ensure that where we can, and I recognise there's some equipment that, doesn't have yet the robustness to be electric charging, but is that part of the programme to move that over?
Yes, certainly that is part of the programme where it can be done. The report that goes to the exec next week sets out in detail the plans with regard to the machinery and the equipment and some of the other issues around weed killer that have been raised. So if I could suggest members have a read of that report, and then obviously we'll be discussed in detail next week.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point. There's a comprehensive report going to the executive next week, which I think may answer some of the questions that are being put. I've got Councillor Baldry wishes to speak. Councillor Baldry.
Yeah, sorry, you and Mr. Powell have answered the point I was going to make. Look at paragraph 4 of the report already published, going to the executive next week, which deals with the question of chemical use, and the following paragraph deals with the equipment we use.
So has anybody got the speaker?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Baldry. Any further questions? Councillor Callaghan.
It's just from what I think can't really see, but Councillor Thomas was saying about it's important to on the public consultation, saying can we, or presume perhaps we already are, when we do sort of start managing council-owned land to increase biodiversity, we could put some information up on the site in some way to actually educate the public on site, so that if people are looking at the changes on the land, they can actually see. By actually reading, for example, like Kingsbridge in Bloom does this sort of thing when it does its planting, it puts signs up explaining what it's doing and why. We could put signs up like that on site rather than just issuing news releases people don't want to see. We could do that on site to explain what we're doing and why.
Adam.
Yeah, so as part of the report that Rob put together, there is an intention to put signage up on sites to make sure that people are aware of why the sites are looking the way they are.
Right. Any other questions? No. Okay, so I think we've been through the items that are on the appendix. So if we could move back to the recommendation that is at the beginning of the report. It asks us to just note the progress. Does any member wish to add to that, especially in respect of any issues concerning the electrical vehicle charging points at all? Councillor Holway.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I would like to thank our officers, Mr. Powell and Mr. Williams, for the work they're doing. They're both working extremely hard. I do refute the comment made by Councillor Brazil. I think that's totally political and playing games. Nobody in this organisation is looking for reasons not to do anything. And as a county councillor, he's much, much better placed than any of us to remove any stumbling blocks. So, thank you.
Okay, if we could, so the recommendation on the paper is that we note the progress, and that I think we would add to that we ask that the comments made during the discussion be noted and dealt with as discussed, or words to that effect. In other words, we include within the recommendation asking the officers to take on board the points made during the discussion. Are members happy to add that to the, yes, rather than us sit here and go through all the points we've made? Yes, because I'm sure they've made a note of them all. Right, all in favour? Any against? No. Okay, if we could now move on to Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan update. Councillor Holway, would you like to introduce the report, and then presumably you'll hand over to Mr. Powell?
Yeah, the report before members today provides the second of 6 monthly update on the Council's Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan, as well as an update on the task and finish group recommendations brought before the committee on the 4th of November last year. The delivery on the Council's climate and biodiversity strategy will continue alongside delivery on the Better Lives for All, which forms the main areas of focus for us. I would particularly like to highlight the following key areas of progress. The Council continues to hold funding under the Green Homes Grant Scheme as we work with BIES, Business Industry Energy Strategy, and partners to deliver retrofit work for homes around the South Hams. Following some difficulty with national supply chains, I'm pleased to report that we've now secured a local approach to delivering these grants and have now begun to approve grants. And we've had more publicity this week to try and get more people interested. Members of our senior leadership and extended leadership team have completed carbon literacy training. Given the seniority of those involved, we can now become registered as a carbon literate organisation at bronze level. The climate change website has undergone some changes, and we've created and published a guide for town and parish councils. Funding's been secured from the Urban Tree Challenge Fund that will see 600 trees planted over 2 years in the area. Also attached to this report is an updated action plan showing progress alongside each action, as well as bringing in our organisational actions and data monitoring sources. Over the next 6 months, our focus will turn inwards as we work towards our organisational net zero target, and at the same time working with partners to finalise the Devon Carbon Plan and continue to make progress on our climate change and biodiversity action plan where we can. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Butler. Well, I think, apologies. Thank you, Chair. I think Council always sort of set out the main achievements and the progress we've made over the last few months. I think there was a question mark over the ability of us to look at the whole of the action plan in its entirety. And I know that was one of the challenges faced by the committee the last time we met. So there is a suggestion that perhaps we might want to report back to the committee in a different format in the future. Something members might want to consider. The action plan is made up of sort of 5 distinct areas, 4 themes, and then our organisational carbon plan. And it might be that if we bring them back by sort of themed area for consideration, that it might make it easier to scrutinise and get into the detail. At the moment, you'll all appreciate there's a huge amount of information in front of members, which does create a challenge. The previous Task and Finish group looked at the action plan and made some recommendations, which will be considered at executive next week. And so I'll leave it with you as chair and members to decide whether there might be an alternative way of looking at this in the future.
Members, if you look at this, is a pretty hefty item for us to consider. There are, in addition to the report, there are 18 documents that we I'm sure you would love to go through each and every one at the moment. I don't know what you're doing this evening, but I mean, I've discussed this with, Councillor Smurd and I have discussed this with officers, and we feel that the way that this is going to be dealt with, that should be dealt with, the way it should be dealt with in the future is in a more manageable way. In other words, it is broken down into various areas. If you look at the agenda, the appendices include an item on energy, an item on sustainability, an item on biodiversity, and an item on capability and engagement. And there's several documents that are with the papers that are dealing with those various items. Now, what we also need to bear in mind is that the Task and Finish group put forward a recommendation that was approved by this committee in November, and is still being considered by the executive, and the executive will be considering this next week. And it may well be, depending on the outcome of the executive decision, that there may well need to be some amendments to the documentation that is currently before us. Therefore, in order to do justice, what I'd like to propose from the chair is this, that the consideration of item 11 of the agenda be deferred pending the outcome of the executive's consideration of the task and finish group's recommendation arising out of the ONS meeting held on the 4th of November 2021, brackets item 37/21, and thereafter consideration of the climate change and biodiversity action plan by overview and scrutiny will be broken down into manageable sections and each dealt with at a separate meeting of the committee, and that in a programme be agreed by the chairman and vice chairman of ONS with officers. In other words, Councillor Smurden and myself will agree a programme that is bringing the various sections back to this committee. Quite obviously, that will be after the executive determines. So I'd like to put that forward as a proposal from the chair. Do I have a second? Councillor Smurden, second that. So if that is the case, then clearly that will save us having to plough away not only through the report but the 18 documents. So that's being as proposed by the chair and vice chair. Would anybody like to speak on this? Councillor Thomas.
I would certainly support that, Chairman, not least because having chaired the task and finish, one of the most gratifying things about the task and finish was that we had consensus across all political sides and the support of the exec member as well in those recommendations. So it will be good to see the executive consider them before they come back, because it's possible that the report will be altered on the back of those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, that's a very important document, and it just crossed my mind that it would be of interest to members of the D&M committee as well. I don't know if it can be looked into any way that those of us who would be interested in this, some involvement for that side of the council as well.
Can I suggest that in our discussions, when Councillor Smurden and I have our discussions with the officers on this, that we take that on board?
Right, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Chairman. Can we just give officers the opportunity to briefly go over the progress we've made so far?
Yes, certainly. I was going to. Mr. Powell.
Well, I mean, hopefully the report sets out the progress we've made on each of those areas, which Councillor Holway has already outlined. I think it would be helpful, rather than just simply to defer the item, to note the progress in regard to those, and for any members' questions they've got about the particular appendices. It's not the appendices, the actual points within the report, the body of the report. So we've talked about progress on the carbon literacy training, the Green Homes grants, and so on. So we welcome any questions from members about progress on those particular actions. That will allow us then to update the action plan.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from members? Okay, so the the recommendation then is, and I'll read this again, is that, sorry. Oh, it's on. Oh, sorry. Okay. So what is the recommendation? It's on the screen. I know there's some additional wording at the end, and each to be dealt with at a separate meeting, and that a programme be agreed at a meeting between the chair and vice chair, and the chair, vice chair, and officers. Okay, so that's been proposed, it's been seconded. Does anybody wish to speak? No, in that case, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
You want to be putting on here about noting the report so far?
Yes. So, so what perhaps we could add to that then, that the original recommendation is that the committee notes the action taken by the officers and thanks them for the work that they've carried out, or words to that effect. Instead, on the last paragraph, you're happy to add that to the recommendation? Do we all agree? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Next is the Devon Home choice.
Break.
Welcome. Right, we're on item 12, the Devon Home choice. So, Councillor Pearce, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Yeah, can I just get it up?
Yes, please do.
I
Yeah.
had a few issues with my laptop this morning. If there's been an update, my laptop isn't working because it's the new version, so. I should have it here, thank you. Yes, well, members, this is the periodic review of the Devon Home choice system, which I'm just waiting for the second meeting. Okay, members. Well, this is the periodic update of the of how we operate with Devon Home choice. I don't think there are any major changes from the last version. You will see there is always an option for us to opt out of Devon Home choice, but this would not be advisable. It would create considerable more work for the council and would not offer such a good option to residents. Now, one of the main benefits of Devon Home choice is that people can bid on their own on a property they would like to live in. And for most people, this really is a choice because they can choose the area and they can choose the type of property. There are certain bands of households who don't have as much choice because if they are in urgent need, then they need to bid on the first thing that comes available. And I think they have 2 goes at that. And then after that, things start getting difficult for them. So on the whole, it is a much better system. People, you know what the lists look like because you get them every week. And it's very much like a kind of initial estate agent's window on the world when you look at it. And so people can see where it is, what the property looks like on the outside, and the minimum of what's going on inside. And obviously they get further details if they get further into the process. We do know, and I'm sure you're aware, that there are a huge number of bids on very popular properties, but there are other properties that aren't so popular and which are actually much easier to access. So it is a question of give and take between the household seeking accommodation and what's available. And from that point of view, it's a pretty democratic system. You've got details in the report of the number of people who are waiting, and you've also got details of the average wait time. Now, average is just that. And so there will be some households that get accommodated quite quickly. They may be very lucky. There are other households that may have to wait a lot longer, either because they're reasonably low down the list and they don't get in the first time, or the second time, or even the third time, or more than that, or because they need specialist accommodation and it doesn't come up very often. And that also is detailed in the report. Now, I'm happy to take questions. I don't know whether you've read all the details of the report, but if there's anything technical on that, I know Isabel Blake is around. I think she's online, isn't she? Oh, sorry, Steph, I didn't see you there. Yeah, so Stephanie's here to, and she'll answer any technical questions.
Thank you, Councillor Chris.
Obviously, the home choice is a way by which, our residents and people who, are seeking housing, it's an access portal, isn't it? So that they can, what are the views of, well, I'm trying to think of the right word, but, for example, things like shelter and, external organisations which help people source housing. What are their views of Devon Home Choice, if you know?
Thanks for that question. It's not just Devon Home Choice. I think most housing areas, counties, have the same system. So it's accepted nationally now that this is the best way of doing it. I don't, in fact, know of any councils that still run their own service, but Steph, you may know. No?
There are local authorities that run an isolated allocation system, but I'm not aware of any that run on the old point system. So the Devon Home Choice system is what's called a choice-based letting system, and that's generally accepted practice, not just nationally actually, but internationally as well, because it puts the focus on housing on the individual, gives them choice, enables them to take control over their housing situation rather than being a passenger on the decisions that the local authority make on their behalf.
Just as a matter of interest, how many years has Devon Home Choice been running?
Devon Home Choice was introduced in 2009.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Reading the report, it's difficult for me to be quite sure. Is there a paucity of 5 and 6 bedroom houses available, or does that simply reflect the lack of need in that area?
It's essentially the least cost-effective property for developers to build. So developers would much prefer to build 2 and 3 bedroom properties. So there is a very distinct lack of 4 or 5, and I don't think we have any 6 bedroom properties available as social housing at all in the district at the moment. So it is a lack of housing, but it's also the demand on paper doesn't look very high. So when you look at the numbers, it doesn't look like there's a huge demand. But when you look at the length of time people wait for that, it's reflective of the fact that that demand is, even though it's relatively small, is entirely unmet by supply.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people actually who use Devon Home Choice, and I find it quite discriminatory actually as a system, because I think people really have a problem navigating it as well. People that are quite vulnerable and need. So that's one of the problems. And then the other problem is if you're not in a high banding, I think the wait time is about 6 years sometimes, and it's a long, by which time everyone's circumstances have changed so much. So I actually don't think it's a great system. I think it's quite difficult. That's my view. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll come in. I understand what you're saying about the system, and vulnerable people can always ask officers to bid for them, can't they? So that is possible. And the other thing is that whilst you find it discriminatory, I agree for people who live in towns who are lower down in the bandings. A lot of people who live in the villages, if they're in band D upwards, will get a fair crack at things if something comes up in their village. But I don't think the point system would be any fairer to them than this is. And as I say, there are properties that aren't particularly popular. And if you're prepared to go and live in one of those properties, then actually you can get in quite quickly. I mean, I know we've got some in Salcombe that are age related, and we know that the first bidder, you know, on those there aren't usually many bids, and you get in quite easily. So from that point of view, it's much better, because if you were just working on a pure point system, you'd be and you'd have to say where you wanted to live. On this system, you can go for a different area than you'd actually thought of if there's somewhere that's easier to get into and it becomes available. So yes, in some ways it's more difficult, but in others it isn't. And as I say, you can always ask officers to bid for you if you find the system too difficult to navigate.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, actually, housing officers have been really helpful. So you know, they've been. I think it just highlights the lack of available property, and that I know that people have been moved, you know, miles out of their area again, which, you know, losing all their local connections, which is actually really not great for communities. So yeah, I've still got reservations about it. So.
If I could just comment briefly, it's just to say we do very regular kind of consultation with Devon Home Choice users. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm looking at you, if you can hear me in the microphone. And what we find frequently is when we get feedback about the accessibility of the system or the usability of the system or frustration with the system, when we drill down into that that feedback, we often find that actually it's the frustration about that lack of property. So I think it's a fair comment to say that it's sometimes difficult to differentiate between, are people actually frustrated at the fact when they say, I don't like the accessibility of the system, it often is reflective of the fact they don't like the accessibility of property because there is a lack of it. Sorry.
Councillor Long.
Chairman, I agree with you there. I think that frustration is because of the lack of property or the lack of the type of property that people are either need or sort of in the area. I've got some questions. I found, you know, Devon Home Choice, I think it's a system that does work. It's got its problems, but I can say that I've had experience of residents who have had problems with the system have received a lot of support from our own housing officers, which I've got to be, you know, express that gratitude to, and I think they're grateful for that ability, and I think that should be made more widely known, that people can talk to people. I think it's that frustration of not being able to talk to people. Where they have people have been able to talk to the team here, things have been resolved, you know, I think effectively, or the frustration lessened. I've got some questions. You know, the report I found interesting, provided me with a lot of details. I think the importance of the local allocations policy is key to it. But do we know the sort of ratios of what is most sought after in areas where people want to live? You know, because obviously there's, you know, some towns and villages have a high number of people with housing needs with a local connection. Do we map that out where that sort of concentration is?
Yes, we can see very clearly that it does tend to be urban centres that are the most high demand areas because of employment, transport links, education and schooling, and access to education and schooling, and also access to support, GP surgeries and so on. And so it's very clear that Totnes, Kingsbridge, Dartmouth are our most high demand areas. If you're interested, I don't have the data available right at my fingertips because it takes a while to run the report. I can give you the data on which we can see exactly how many bids each property area has received, because it's broken down into parish. So we can look at that in very fine detail. It would take too long to run the report now, but I can give you that detail if you like.
A couple of other questions, Chairman, if I may. With this experience and with Devon Home Choice with data, do we need is this highlighting the need, or does this highlight the need for more emergency short-term properties? Do you sort of tend to that data come out of the Home Choice?
That's not data that's directly reflected by Devon Home Choice, because Devon Home Choice wouldn't be a immediate housing solution. Even for people who are Band A, for example, we still have to wait for the suitable properties to come up. So it can be several weeks or even months for even a Band A applicant to be accommodated. We do recognise, though, that just from the other side of the work that I do, which is on the homelessness side of it, that we are working on developing the Housing First project. So we're purchasing 4 Housing First flats, which is for rough sleepers to directly access. We do have good access to B&B accommodation, but not in area. So we're often having to place people in Plymouth or Torquay, for example, and that's simply because there is no need for our customs essentially within the South Hams. So that's slightly lacking, but we are also looking at bidding on the 2nd of February, the bid is due, in fact, for houses of multiple occupation to use as intermediate or emergency accommodation for people. So it is a need, definitely it's there, but it is a need that we recognise and we are trying to address.
Do we, via Devon Home Choice, identify sort of how many people are wanting to swap housing? Is there a mechanism there? Because I just sort of thinking there, really on the other side, how many people are extremely happy in their homes and don't wish or feel a need to move, and therefore could we, would this be a database to actually be able to figure out the type of homes that need to be built to reflect that need out there, or that willingness that people like the type of housing that's provided?
Actual house swaps is dealt with by the mutual exchange website, which is called Home Swapper. So that is a slightly separate thing. What we can see through Devon Home Choice is the number of people who are registered that aren't in housing need, so they are Band E, and there is a very high proportion of that compared to the people that are in housing need. So that's demonstrative of the fact that there are people on there who are not in need but do want to move, do want to swap, do want to relocate for non-urgent reasons, for example. I think the IT system that we use doesn't have the scope to be able to track preference and desire in quite that way. So what we can see is where people, if someone lives in Totnes at the moment, and we know whether they want to live in Totnes or Totnes and Dartmouth, or Totnes and Dartmouth and Kingsbridge, or Buckfastleigh in Teambridge, for example. But there is a limitation to how much data we can draw, although it is quite we can get quite a lot. But I don't know whether we could use it for quite the purpose that you're talking about.
Just following on from that.
Councillor Benson, I'll come to you after Councillor McGann.
Sorry, this is a quick point, but I mean, isn't length of tenure a good indicator of being happy in the house? Can you classify them, or those ones that have actually stayed put, having been allocated a place? Is there any way of doing that within the IT system that you've got?
So we would only be able to see if we've housed somebody through Devon Home Choice and then we house somebody again through Devon Home Choice, we can obviously see how long they remained in the accommodation for that period. What we can't see is if they, so if we house them and then they move into private rented, or their situation changes and they're able to access an owner-occupied property, we would have no way of knowing that they've done that because we're no longer a stockholding authority. We don't see the end of social housing tenancies. That would be Live West and Sanctuary and so on. So we can with a handful of people, but Devon Home Choice doesn't tend to be a revolving door, which is the term we use in homelessness for clients that we see repeatedly. So it would be a small percentage, I would say, that we could say how long they've lived there.
Councillor Pennington.
Yes.
Yeah, so if we look at the financial section of the section 7, the implications, it outlines there what the cost of running the Devon Home Choice system is. So it's basically just shy of 30,000 or just over 30,000 a year. We would also have to buy the software that we use originally as well. So that's the running cost, but not the purchase costs of it. So that's why it's not in the that's why it's not in section 6. It's because I break it down in section 7. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Start again. Get this right. Right. Thank you for answering the questions. So I'd like to move the recommendation that's on the screen, that the committee recommend to the executive that the council continues to be a member of Devon Home Choice. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes.
Councillor Smurden. Right. Does anybody wish to speak? No, in that case, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, if we could now move on to item 13, which is the task and finish group updates. The first is dealing with the recently formed housing task and finish group, and I'll invite Councillor Smurden to give a report on the state of play as far as that group is concerned.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you know, we've formed a housing task and finish group. One member of our group, Councillor Sweet, asked that it be renamed the Homes Task and Finish, which I think most of us have agreed with. So I think we'll probably go with that. So it comprises of 8 members. Myself as chair, then you have Councillors Birch, O'Callaghan, Sweet, Mackay, Foss, Taylor and Reeve. We also agreed that we would endeavour that the task and finish group reports back to ONS by the next meeting, which is the 17th of March. So we've effectively got 2 months to do this work. We had an initial discussion meeting. One of the things was that Councillor Birch helpfully forwarded a link to a Cornwall Council online seminar that went into great detail about how Cornwall Council, and in particular Cornwall Council Community Land Trust, there's a lot of C's in there, carry out searches for sites. Members of the group should have got that, and I'd recommend you look through it. It is rather long. It is 4 hours, but you can sort of skip through it. But there are some very good ideas in there. Not least, right at the very end, a concept called co-housing, which involves buying up really large houses and effectively turning them into houses of multiple occupancy, houses that were previously occupied by just 2 people. There's an example of one that now houses 16. Members of the task and finish group are individually researching various other authorities' ways and methods of providing affordable housing. I mean, that's really our main raison d'etre, and each individual member is looking at a different aspect of affordable housing provision across the country, and we'll look at these in later meetings. At the next meeting, we will have Tom Morris on the call, who is one of our housing delivery team. Tom has got extensive experience of community land trusts and general planning around affordable housing, and I'm sure what he has to say will be very interesting. So that's state of play, Chair.
Yeah. Are there any questions? No. Okay. So thank you. Also on the task and finish group update, there's a proposal from Mid Devon. I think the paper that was circulated with the agenda, I think it serves to confuse. So if I could seek to clarify the position, I received a letter from Mid Devon, and it was a letter from the chair of the Mid Devon District Council's Scrutiny Committee. I'll pick out the main parts of the letter. And it said, I'm writing as chair of the Mid Devon District Council's Scrutiny Committee to establish whether your authority would be willing to work with us to undertake a review into the planning controls and regulatory requirements associated with the bioenergy industry within Devon. Then goes on to give some details on this. And it says that the matter was discussed at our Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 8th of November 2021, and the full reports are available. And the full report is actually the one that was circulated with the papers. It then goes on to say, at this stage, we're looking for expressions of interest and your views on how to take this type of inter-authority inquiry, how to take forward this type of inter-authority inquiry. It would be helpful if you would acknowledge this letter and let me know when, if at all, you will be able to raise this with your appropriate committee. So what is before us is an invitation to indicate whether or not we would be interested in working with Mid Devon and other authorities in undertaking a review into the planning controls and regulatory requirements associated with the bioenergy industry within Devon. Councillor Smurden would like to say a few words on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've waited a long time for an item to come along which relates to my specific subject, which to a large extent involves dealing with manure. So it would appear that with this one, my time has come. So for those, I mean, I'm sure most people know, anaerobic digestion involves, effectively putting various items, whether it's waste, byproducts, etc., or in a lot of cases, just sort of green materials into a digester and producing gas, well, mainly biomethane and carbon dioxide. But the biomethane being used, it explains it in the text there. That it's either used on site, put through an engine to generate power on site, or in a lot of other cases, it's fed directly into the gas grid. So there are various ways of using it. Now, I've forwarded this morning to Councillor Foss as well, because I didn't actually realise that Richard was going to be part of this. But this is my take on it from my experience, from the farming perspective. This mainly happens in Mid Devon, sort of north of the M5, the Tiverton-Cullompton area. There are several large anaerobic digestion plants. And the problem is, as it's outlined there, that they've grown, and in order to keep those plants going, various crops are grown to put in them, such as maize, miscanthus, really bulky, products which need transporting around. And in the nature of the game is that, for efficiency of transporting these things around, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, the size of farm machinery, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So effectively, you've got, at certain times of the year, you've got a lot of very heavy agricultural traffic on minor roads around the Mid Devon area, bringing stuff in for the AD plants, and then ongoing. I mean, they digest what's going in there, and then they've got to dispose of what is taken out, which is known as the digestate, which is that's got a fertilizer value. So then that has to be transported back to the farms, for use on the field. So you've got the double whammy of the stuff being brought in, and then it's being taken out again. Now, we've got one large scale AD plant in the South Hams, which is the one at Langage, which is very close to the A38. Now, that one, even though it was set up to take farm waste, I think only takes food waste products. It does take all of South Hams's food waste products. Now, that's the biggest one that we've got. Now, as far as I'm aware, that causes very little problems with access or smells. Now, I don't know whether Ivybridge, Barry or Lance, whether you've had any, people have complained about anything that's happening down there. So I think my experience of Langage is that I think it works pretty well. So there are some reasonable sized AD plants in West Devon near Holsworthy, but they're not our problem. Oh, that's great. My computer, whoops! Just when you need it, the technology decides to let you down. So effectively, my take on it is, I fully understand and I know that there is a problem in the Mid Devon area. I'm not 100% sure whether it's that much of a problem in other parts of the county. Also, to a degree, I think it's a planning issue. It's more a planning issue than it is a scrutiny issue. And this is where I have. I don't want to sound harsh, but effectively we're sort of because this does ask us to if we will deploy. Member time and possibly resources towards helping with this. And I'm sort of thinking that we're being asked to help another council's whilst I've got, I know that it is a genuine problem for Mid Devon, but we've a lot of our area is AONB. If somebody wanted to build one of these big plants, I don't think our planning within the AONB or national park wouldn't allow it. In short, I'm not sure that it's a problem for us, but that's my take on it, and it's up to other. It's not. I've given my benefit of my knowledge, and it's up to other members to. I don't want to hog it all.
Okay. Any other members wish to? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I don't understand the merits, but thank you for the explanation, Councillor Smurden. I think being a slightly more selfish in terms of the work that this committee has to do. Today we saw that we examined the first thematic update out of the corporate strategy, and we've got a programme of reviewing those going forward, which if the committee does its job properly will take a considerable amount of time, then allowing for the additional items that come up, such as we're talking about the contact centre report and so on. I do think that this is an additional burden on the committee, although, I would always promote interworking between councils. I just think that this might be a step too far, is my personal opinion.
Thank you. So Thomas.
Firstly, thank you, Councillor Smurden. Just for the record, Langage is in the ward that Councillor Baldry and I cover, and no problem at all. But the good news from your point of view is that you are quite right. We've never had any complaints either about traffic or indeed about odours. Chairman, I think we should take Councillor Smurden's advice on this. He and Councillor Foss, silence implies assent. I'm assuming, Councillor Foss, that you agree with Councillor Smurden. Yes, I do. On that basis, Chairman, I think we should go with the professional advice we have in the room and say thanks, but no thanks.
Okay. Last item last item on the agenda is the work programme. If I can call this up. Right, the work programme. See, we've got almost. Yeah, I think no. Yeah, Ian wants to come in a moment. Okay. So we have a full programme on the 17th of March and the 22nd of April, and you can see that we continue to look at the council's delivery against the corporate theme. So in March, it's communities, and in April, it's homes. So that's that's we have, as I say, we have a full agenda for March and April. Councillor Brazil, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, John. What it was is that people may have already seen that the Southwest ambulance times is the worst in the country as far as responding to emergency calls, and on top of that, I'm having particular problems in my area in getting them to replace a first responder. And as such, I would like for the Southwestern Ambulance Service NHS Foundation Trust to come to one of our scrutiny meetings so we can ask questions as to what they're actually doing and how they're going to mitigate these issues that we're suffering from.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're being, there's a request from Councillor Brazil that we send an invitation to the Southwest Ambulance Service to come along to the committee to give a presentation in a similar manner that we invite other third-party organisations. I'd like to support that and like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Smurden. Councillor Pennington, are you supporting? Yeah, okay. Does anybody wish to speak? No. Okay, do we all agree? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Mallow.
Thank you, Chair. So having had that and looking at the programme, can I suggest that we look to try and invite, offer the March or the April dates to Southwest Ambulance Service if we can, on the basis of the earlier discussion that we had with Councillor Hopwood about contact centre reports. I've just checked the records and the discussion was from the 4th of November meeting, and as Councillor Hopwood said, it was 6 months. Now 6 months will take us to May, but looking and bearing in mind the previous conversation about inviting Southwest Ambulance Service and Councillor Hopwood's comments about the officer being not available, can I suggest we schedule that in for the June meeting, the contact centre report?
So this is the item under the 17th of March, the standards performance report. It's being proposed that this be moved to...
No. This is, we're talking about the earlier conversation about the contact centre performance and bringing a report back. And it also falls in with the corporate theme of council services and KPI performance. So I just think it would be a natural fit.
Yeah. Do we all agree? Yeah. Okay. Is that it?
That was it.
Any other comments, questions on the work programme?
Chairman, have we covered the biodiversity that we're bringing back?
We've just done that.
We're going to discuss
it. So the one.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, the one that we're talking about, the climate change action. Yes, that we've got to. That's the meeting that Councillor Smurd and myself are having with the officers to work out a programme. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Well, thank you very much indeed, and they concludes the meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, members.
Yeah, the sheet is swastika. All right, experiment. So who cares?